In the summer of 1867, long after the cannons of the Civil War had gone silent, something far quieter and far more unsettling took root in a farming valley outside Sedalia, Missouri. It did not arrive with a storm, or fire, or plague. It arrived with a child. By the time Dr. Samuel Harding began writing about Timothy Caldwell, 3 people were already dead. Harding was not a superstitious man. He had studied medicine in St. Louis, treated shattered limbs and fevered minds during the war, and prided himself on believing only what could be observed, measured, and proven. Yet as he filled the pages of his leather-bound journals, his careful handwriting betrayed a tremor he could not fully control. "There is nothing visibly wrong with the boy," he wrote, "and that is precisely the problem." Timothy Caldwell was 8 years old when he came to live on his uncle's farm, a narrow stretch of land bordered by timber and creek water that ran brown after heavy rain. His father had died in uniform. His mother had followed not long after, claimed by illness that left her coughing blood into a rag she tried to hide from her son. By spring of 1866, Timothy was an orphan with nowhere left to go. Thomas Caldwell took the boy in out of duty, not affection. War had carved Thomas into something hard and silent. His wife, Sarah, had once been warm, neighbors said, but childlessness and hardship had sharpened her into someone quick to scold and slow to comfort. Still, a farm needed hands, and Timothy, small though he was, could work. And work he did. Neighbors noticed first. The boy rose before dawn and did not stop until the sky went purple with evening. He hauled water, mended fence rails, and fed livestock with the steady focus of a grown laborer. He never argued, never sulked, never asked to rest. "It ain't natural," Mrs. Eleanor Patterson told her husband one night over supper. "Children are meant to laugh, to run wild some. That one just watches." Animals watched him too. Chickens scattered when he passed the fence line. Dogs lowered their heads and backed away, tails tucked. Horses rolled their eyes and stamped as if scenting a coming storm. Farmers blamed nerves, weather, or wolves in the distance. Anything but the quiet boy with the pale eyes. Dr. Harding met Timothy for the first time in town that June. The child removed his hat politely, answered questions with calm clarity, and held the doctor's gaze without flinching. Most children fidgeted under adult attention. Timothy did not. It felt, Harding later wrote, as though he himself were being examined. The first death came in August. Little Mary Fletcher drowned in a shallow stretch of Willow Creek where water barely reached an adult's knees. It was Timothy who found her. He walked to her parents' home with damp cuffs and a solemn expression, explaining exactly where she lay and how she looked. Too exactly. Harding tried to dismiss the thought. Some children remembered details. Some grew serious after tragedy. Yet when he questioned the boy, Timothy described the position of Mary's hands, the branch that had snagged her dress, even the way the water moved around her hair. He spoke the way a man might describe a broken wagon wheel. At the funeral, Timothy sat with perfect stillness. He bowed his head at the right moments. When Mary's mother wept so hard she nearly collapsed, Timothy did not look away. His eyes were dry, attentive, almost curious. Harding told himself he was imagining things. Grief made people see patterns where none existed. A single accident proved nothing. But before summer ended, there would be another body. The second death arrived dressed as misfortune. Old Henrik Larson had climbed Devil's Bluff for nearly 20 years. The rocky rise overlooked Willow Creek, and from its ledges he tended wild beehives wedged into the stone. He knew every foothold, every loose rock, every place where the limestone crumbled under weight. So when they found him broken at the base of the bluff one September morning, the explanation came easily. He must have slipped, someone said. Bees probably spooked him, said another. But Dr. Harding, kneeling beside the body, felt the same quiet unease that had followed Mary Fletcher's drowning. Henrik's neck had snapped cleanly. Death would have been instant. Around his body lay an odd scatter of dead bees, not hundreds, as might be expected from a disturbed hive, but a small cluster, concentrated strangely near his shoulders and face. Harding climbed the bluff himself that afternoon. The hives were intact, the bees calm. No broken comb, no fresh disturbance. At the edge of the drop, he found something else. A scuffed patch of dust, 2 sets of marks, one heavy, boot-shaped, the other smaller, barely visible. A child's footprint. By the time Harding returned to town, Timothy Caldwell had already told his story. I saw Mr. Larson's hat down below, the boy explained, voice soft with concern. I called to him, but he didn't answer. I climbed down to check. His tone was perfect. Respectful. Sad, but not shaken. How did you know where to look? Harding asked. Timothy gave a small shrug. I walk those woods sometimes. You see things if you pay attention. Harding wrote that line down later. You see things if you pay attention. 3 weeks after Henrik's fall, 6-year-old Jacob Mills vanished while playing near the tree line. Search parties combed the woods for days. Timothy insisted on helping. He walked longer than grown men twice his size, never complaining, never tiring. On the 4th morning, he appeared at the Mills cabin at dawn. I think I heard crying yesterday, he said quietly, near the old well north of the ridge. The well was nearly invisible beneath brush and fallen timber. It took 5 men working together to clear a path wide enough to look inside. Jacob was at the bottom, alive, but barely. They pulled him up, his lips cracked, skin gray, breath shallow. Dr. Harding worked for hours, but the boy died before sunset. No one questioned how Timothy had known where to search. They called it luck, providence, a blessing that the child had been found at all. But Harding visited the well alone the next day. The brush had not fallen naturally. Branches had been placed with care, layered in a way that disguised the opening, while still allowing faint sound to escape. Not enough for a passerby to notice. Enough for someone who already knew. Harding stood at the rim for a long time, staring into darkness that smelled of damp stone and decay. 3 tragedies. 3 times Timothy had been first on the scene. 3 times he had offered calm, precise accounts that felt rehearsed rather than remembered. Still, suspicion was not proof. Timothy attended church each Sunday, reciting prayers without stumbling. He worked harder than any farmhand in the county. He never lied, at least not in ways anyone could catch. But Harding had treated soldiers who smiled after battle and spoke gently while describing horrors no decent mind could dwell on. He recognized that same stillness now in a child's pale blue eyes. And for the first time in his career, the doctor began keeping notes not about illness, but about boy. By the time autumn settled over Sedalia County, death had become something that happened in 2s and 3s. Not dramatic, not bloody, just wrong. Chickens stopped laying, then turned up behind coops with their necks broken cleanly, feathers undisturbed. Calves were found tangled in fence rails in ways that made seasoned farmers scratch their heads. A mule walked into a shallow ditch and somehow shattered a leg so badly it had to be put down. Bad luck, people said. Hard year. But the losses followed a pattern Dr. Harding could not ignore. Every farm touched by these strange accidents lay within easy walking distance of the Caldwell property, and nearly every farmer remembered seeing Timothy nearby. He was just passing through, James Wickham told Harding. Polite as always, asked about the calf, even patted her nose. Next morning we found her dead. Mrs. Patterson had lost 17 chickens in 2 months. When Harding examined the latest bodies, he found the same thing each time, precise pressure at the base of the skull. Quick, efficient, no tearing, no clumsy struggle, not a fox, not chance, skill. When Harding visited the Caldwell farm under the excuse of checking Sarah's persistent cough, Timothy stood close by, hands folded behind his back, listening. Why do animals kick after they're dying? The boy asked suddenly. Harding looked at him. Sometimes nerves fire after the brain stops. Timothy nodded slowly, absorbing the answer. So they don't feel it anymore? No, Harding said carefully. They don't. The boy seemed satisfied. Harding began testing him. He mentioned a fictional case of a man who survived a severe head wound. Timothy listened, then asked exactly where on the skull the injury had been. When Harding gave a vague answer, the boy gently pressed for detail, not with excitement, with focus, like someone studying instructions. One evening, Harding stopped by the Patterson farm and found Eleanor Patterson in tears beside her barn. Her favorite milk cow lay dead, throat crushed, no sign of struggle. I heard something last night, she whispered. Thought it was wind. When I looked out the window, I saw someone by the fence. Who? Harding asked. She hesitated. Small shape. Could have been a child. She didn't say the name. She didn't have to. Harding's notes grew longer. Dates, locations, sightings, questions Timothy asked. The boy's presence hovered at the edges of every page like a shadow that never stepped fully into view. Yet in town, Timothy remained the perfect child. At church, he helped old women down the steps. He carried wood for the widowed Mrs. Grant. He spoke softly, smiled politely, and he watched. Harding saw it during Jacob Mill's funeral. While adults wept openly, Timothy's gaze moved from face to face, measuring grief the way a scholar might study weather patterns. Learning it. That night, Harding wrote a line he would later wish he'd acted on sooner. The danger is not that the boy feels too much, but that he feels nothing at all. Winter came early that year, sealing Sedalia County beneath ice and silence. The cold did what fear could not. It slowed life down enough for Dr. Harding to watch carefully. He began visiting the Caldwell farm more often, claiming concern over Sarah's worsening nerves and Thomas's lingering war injuries. In truth, he wanted proximity to Timothy. Observation, confirmation. The boy never objected. In fact, he seemed to enjoy the visits. One afternoon, Harding found Timothy in the barn, crouched beside a litter of newborn kittens. One lay apart from the others, smaller, weaker. "Poor thing won't last," Thomas muttered from behind him. "Run to the litter." Timothy stroked the tiny animal with gentle fingers. "How long do you think?" he asked Harding. "Hard to say," Harding replied. "Maybe a day." Timothy nodded, thoughtful. The next morning, Harding returned earlier than usual. Snow creaked under his boots as he approached the barn. Inside, he found Timothy alone. The small kitten lay on a wooden crate, dead. No blood, no marks, just stillness. "You were right," Timothy said calmly. "It didn't last." Harding knelt. The kitten's neck was broken with clean, deliberate force, not by accident. "Did it suffer?" Timothy asked. Harding forced himself to meet the boy's eyes. "Why are you so interested in that?" Timothy tilted his head slightly. "I don't like not knowing things." That answer followed Harding home and into his sleep. Days later, another incident shook him deeper. Harding arrived unexpectedly and found Timothy watching as his uncle slaughtered a hog. Most children turned away from such things. Timothy leaned closer. "Where does it stop feeling pain?" he asked as the animal bled out. Thomas laughed gruffly. "Boy's got a strong stomach. Good for farm work." Harding didn't laugh. He noticed Timothy's eyes, not wide, not horrified. Focused, cataloging. That night, Harding did something he had never done before. He followed the boy. Moonlight glazed the snow as Timothy slipped from the house after midnight, moving with quiet confidence through the fields. Harding kept his distance, heart pounding. Timothy crossed into the Patterson property. He stopped at the chicken coop. From the shadows, Harding watched the small figure reach inside, hands moving with practiced precision. A faint flutter. Then, silence. Timothy stepped back, studying his work. Not hurried, not afraid. Curious. Harding felt ice crawl up his spine. This was not rage, not impulse. This was experimentation. The next morning, Mrs. Patterson found another dead hen. Timothy helped her bury it. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am," he said softly. Harding stood nearby, bile rising in his throat, realizing with sick clarity that the boy wasn't just witnessing death. He was learning it, perfecting it, and no one else could see it. Not yet. By February of 1867, Dr. Samuel Harding no longer doubted. He was living beside something he did not have the language to name. Not madness, not cruelty born of abuse, not the wild, impulsive violence of troubled youth. This was patience, curiosity, calculation, and it wore the face of an obedient child. Harding began writing everything down in coded notes, hiding pages inside the lining of his medical bag. He documented dates Timothy had been seen near livestock deaths, the questions he asked about pain, the nights he slipped from the house, the way animals reacted before he even touched them. But suspicion is not proof, and proof was what he needed before accusing a child in a tight-knit farming community already exhausted by war and grief. The breaking point came in March. Sarah Caldwell took ill with a sudden fever. Harding was called to the farm and arrived to find her pale, sweating, barely conscious. Thomas hovered helplessly while Timothy stood quietly at the foot of the bed. "What happened?" Harding asked. "She was fine at breakfast," Thomas said. Then she drank some water from the well and took sick not an hour later. Harding examined the cup on the bedside table. A faint, bitter smell lingered. He went to the well behind the house. At the bottom of the bucket, caught in the ice crust, were crushed seeds he recognized from his wartime medical experience. Wild hemlock, poisonous, not enough to kill quickly, but enough to cause suffering first. Harding turned slowly. Timothy stood in the doorway, watching him. "You said some plants can stop the heart," the boy said. "I wanted to see if that was true." Harding's blood ran cold. "You gave this to your aunt?" "I didn't know how much to use," Timothy replied calmly. "I'm still learning." There was no anger in his voice, no fear, only disappointment. In the results, Harding made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He told Thomas the sickness was likely from spoiled food. He treated Sarah aggressively and she survived. Barely. But that night, Harding rode through snow to the county seat with his journals hidden under his coat. He did not speak of evil. He did not speak of murder. He wrote, instead of a juvenile mind displaying profound absence of empathy, advanced anatomical curiosity, and escalating experimental behavior toward living subjects. Authorities quietly removed Timothy Caldwell from the farm before spring. Officially, he was sent to a charitable institution in St. Louis for moral and mental correction. No trial, no public accusation, no record the town would have to live with. Sedalia buried the story the way rural towns bury many things, under silence and routine. Dr. Harding's journals were sealed after his death, considered too disturbing and too unbelievable to release. But in the final entry, written in shaking ink, he confessed the truth he could never say aloud. "I do not believe the boy killed from anger or hatred. I believe he killed to understand. And I fear there are others like him, walking among us, wearing faces we trust." If this story chilled you, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more true dark history uncovered from the shadows of the past.